so ad hoc in the last 12 years since Fergus started off his conferences in 2003, I think it was. So instead of looking at all the difficulties that we are having with emerging, like people are talking about having to travel 45 kilometres and all that sort of thing that's gone on, all the negatives, we are saying that let's look at the positives and see if we can standardise ESOL across our ETB. So the emphasis here is it's the Galway and Roscommon Educational and Training Board. I'm not saying that it's a model, because Fergus was talking about a model there a few weeks ago. It's not a model for anybody else. It's just that we're looking towards standardising ESOL in the Galway and Roscommon Education and Training Board. Well, the process began because the AEO in Galway and Roscommon thought, as I said before, that she'd rather look at the situation as an opportunity rather than a negative. And each of the adult literacy organisers was asked to standardise process across the county, there's the old speak coming in across the two counties. So what I did was I sent a small survey to the ALOs and ESOL coordinators in Galway and Roscommon. I asked them to feedback. I did the same with the other 15 ETBs. It was, for those of you who've received it, it was a very brief survey. It's not, scientifically rigorous. It was just to give us an idea of what was happening across the country. Then I looked at the guideline documents. You've mentioned a few of them. I've got them here if anybody wants to see them. So you're talking about the White Paper on Education 2000, the IVEA documents. There were four of them. There was one in 2005 on migrant workers. There was the one in 2008, which was, very, ambitious. It wanted an ESOL framework across the country. It wanted an ESOL body, actually even named that ESOL body. The NALA document was in there, and if I may say so as well, the NALA document was more practice-based. It recommended 4 hours per week. It recommended intensity. It recommended continuous programs, which is necessary, whereas the IVA tended towards bureaucracy rather than the classroom itself. Then you've got the operational guidelines, which have moved away from the old thing of asylum seeker, refugee, and now everybody who is unemployed and unskilled is in there. But you've also got to take into consideration the further education strategy, and that recommends what we're doing. It recommends that a policy has to be written on ESOL. But also you have to look at the Education Act 1998, and in there it says provision for anybody with disadvantage should be offered across the country to everybody. So that's very, very important. One of the problems that we have is in adult literacy we can do up to A2 level. That's maybe FET level 3. So we're recommended by the operational guidelines to refer to other provisions in the ETB when we go past that. So I've recommended that. I've recommended, just like Mary does something similar in Dublin, and something similar goes on elsewhere, that the further educational colleges take up the slack and look after the people who are above B1 level. However, the suggestion always in there is that you charge people for that. Now, why would you charge people above B1 level? Are we punishing them because they have B1? That doesn't make much sense. It's punishment by ESOL or punishment by literacy. The Educational Act, or the Education Act 1998, says we need to give free provision to everybody in the country that has a disadvantage. And people with B1 English have a disadvantage because they can't get into the workplace because their level of English isn't good enough. One of the things that I've recommended to the ETB is a little bit of learner autonomy, because if somebody's doing 2 hours or 4 hours a week, it's not enough. So people coming in for English need to take a little bit of responsibility themselves, or what David Little in Trinity and on the ERP programme called self-access learning. And that's perfect, the Right On is perfect for that. It's not the be and end all of everything, but it's a support,
So what are the problems, barriers that militate against the implementation of your recommendations?
One would be the hierarchy, the people above me, the AEO, and I must say she's very pro-literacy and she's interested, but then it has to go to CEO level, so they have to make the decision. So I just recommended, hopefully it won't end up in a box like most stuff does in Ireland, up in a shelf somewhere down in the basement, and people will pay attention to it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, of course, we have to have an agreement between ourselves. I think we're 7 ALOs now, when there used to be just me, and I had this sort of Obama executive power, and I signed But
You didn't have the Senate.
I didn't have this, and I didn't get as old looking as he got. I saw him last night on the TV. But I think so. Obviously, the other ALOs and the other ESOL coordinators have to agree, and different things have to be taken into consideration. For example, like I'm in the city, I have some concerns. Somebody is in my column with not a lot of ESOL people, so we have to get together and agree amongst ourselves. Yeah, this is the way to go. So you deal with the A0 or the literacy problem with the ESOL people as well, and then you deal with the language problem up to FETAC level 3, and then it goes beyond your remit, as do other things,
Yeah.
So I don't see any problem there.
So you think there's enough funding nationally for ESOL?
Oh, I don't know that, because it's
Alright.
obviously listening to Lavinia
Yeah.
and hearing what
Yeah.
many other people have said is very different in other places. But
Yeah.
in the 2 places that I've worked in
Yeah.
County Clare and in Galway, very specifically, we have a budget, and the ALO decides where that budget goes. So you
Yeah.
say, okay, I have such a demand. Well, I'm going to use that for that demand. I have a demand for
Yeah.
IT. Well, I'm going to use that money for IT, and it's
Yeah.
you've got to balance
Yeah.
the budget.
Okay.